Today, we are diving into a really fascinating story, a huge oil and gas company that says it's trying to go green. Now, this is a massive gamble, and we're going to break down whether it's a genuine transformation or maybe just a lot of smoke and mirrors.
And that really gets to the heart of the big question we're exploring today, one that, affects all of us. Can a company whose entire business is built on fossil fuels really truly change its stripes and go green?
So the company at the center of all this is IRPC. They are a massive integrated petrochemical player based in Thailand. We're talking about a huge industrial park with everything from an oil depot to its own power plant. So their whole business is, by its very nature, incredibly carbon intensive.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at their green promises, then we'll dive into the actual blueprint they've laid out. We'll follow the money, see who's checking their work, and then try to see what the whole picture really looks like. So let's start with the fundamental conflict here. IRPC themselves admit they're in a high environmental impact industry. Yet at the exact same time, they're making these huge promises to go green. So how do you square that circle?
And look, this isn't just some fluffy PR talk. This is their official mission statement. They've put it right there at the top. Their goal is to innovate for sustainable material and energy. That is a seriously bold claim, so let's dig in and see what the actual plan is.
Okay, so how does a big, bold mission statement like that become an actual, real-world strategy? Let's take a look at their blueprint.
So they've broken it all down into these three main pillars. First, and most obviously, is directly tackling climate change. Second, they're leaning into the circular economy, the idea of turning waste into something valuable. And third, creating social value, which is all about focusing on the well-being of the community. It's a pretty comprehensive approach, you have to admit.
Now, under that climate change pillar, they've set some very specific, very ambitious long-term targets. They're aiming for carbon neutrality by 2050 and then full net zero by 2060. Now, these are huge promises, especially for a company whose own data shows its greenhouse gas emissions were actually climbing for much of the last decade until just very recently. And to give their strategy even more weight, they've mapped it directly to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. They're specifically targeting big ones like climate action and responsible consumption, which shows they're really trying to speak that global language of sustainability. But, how do you take these giant goals and make them matter in day-to-day business? Well, IPRC uses this really powerful tool to kind of force the issue. And frankly, this is where things get really interesting. They use something called internal carbon pricing. What that means is they've basically created their own internal tax on carbon. So when they're thinking about a new project, they don't just look at the normal costs, they actually add a hypothetical cost for every single ton of carbon that project is going to emit. And get this, they've put a real price on it, anywhere from $20 to $90 for every ton of CO2. Now, that is not just for show. A price that high can totally change the math on a new project, making a dirty investment look unprofitable right from the start. So here's how it works in practice. A project that would create a ton of emissions all of a sudden looks way more expensive on paper. And that automatically makes greener, low-carbon projects look so much more attractive financially. It's a really clever way to steer the company's own money towards its own climate goals. Okay, so they have all these ambitious claims, these internal systems. But the big question is, how do we know any of this isn't just clever greenwashing? Who is checking their work and holding them accountable? Well, this is where third-party verification comes into play. To add a layer of credibility, IRPC actually hired an external, internationally recognized company called DNV to come in and independently assess their green financing framework.
This official review is called a second-party opinion, or an SPO, and it's a really crucial step. Think of it like a referee in a game. Having an outside expert like DNV come in and check that their framework aligns with green principles, well, that gives investors and the public a lot more confidence that the company's setup is actually legit.
All right, so the green framework seems pretty solid on paper, but a plan is only as good as the company's ability to actually pay for it. So let's pivot and look at the financials. What do the numbers really say? Now, at first glance, things look fine. This is the conclusion from the independent auditor's review of their recent financial statements. It's pretty standard language that basically just says, yep, the books appear to be in order according to all the accounting rules. But that clean audit report is hiding a much, much messier reality. In that exact same period, the company actually lost over 3 billion Thai baht. That is a massive financial problem that puts all of those ambitious green plans in some serious jeopardy.
And there's another little wrinkle. The auditor flagged something called an emphasis of matter. Basically, it's the auditor saying, hey, pay attention to this. It points to a potential tax bill of 538 million baht that the company is fighting. Now, IRPC is confident they won't have to pay it, but it's another layer of financial uncertainty hanging over them.
Okay, so let's pull all these different pieces together. We've got the ambitious green promises on one side, and then we have the tough business realities on the other. So what does this all really mean?
And this really is the core of the whole story, isn't it? On one hand, you have the promise, a really well-designed green strategy with all the right pieces, UN goals, internal carbon pricing, even third-party checks. But then you look at the reality, a company losing billions of baht, facing a potential tax bomb, and critically, a history of increasing its emissions until just recently. The promise and the actual performance, they feel miles apart.
And this all leaves us with one final, pretty big question. Because the case of IRPC isn't just about one company in Thailand. It's really a snapshot of the enormous challenge that our entire industrial economy is facing. Is this just what the transition looks like? A messy, difficult, and constant balancing act between the urgent needs of the planet and the cold, hard realities of profit and loss.